In 2011, one of the largest scientific experiments in coastal protection took shape in the Netherlands, the sand motor. An artificial peninsula designed to nourish the coast for the coming 20 years. The sand motor slowly spreads towards the beaches and dunes under the influence of waves, tides and the wind. Here, nature does its job. Different plants, birds and other animals emerge, while nature lovers explore the fascinating and unique coastal landscape of the sand motor. To plan the realization of the sand motor, financial resources, knowledge, skills and cooperation of all parties involved were essential. For such a large-scale project, it was quite a challenge to get everyone on the same page. 3 goals were defined: contributing to coastal safety, adding an attractive area for leisure activities and nature development, and stimulate knowledge development about coastal management. At the start of this ambitious project, there were only calculated assumptions about what was going to happen in the next couple of years. There were lots of challenges and numerous questions. Right after its completion, the sand motor was still a largely empty peninsula of sand, ready for nature to spread its sand to the beaches. And it did exactly that. For 10 years, we studied the functioning of the sand motor. Now, a decade later, we can share the results. The conclusions are positive. The sand motor contributes to coastal protection, provides a wealth of new knowledge, and is good for both nature and recreation. The sand motor contributes to coastal safety in the long run. Current and wind cause the large quantity of sand to spread over the beach and dunes. It took a while for these dunes to emerge. In the first 5 years, the sand hardly reached the dunes because of the lagoon and the dune lake.
Well, you need a couple of ingredients for the development of the dune area. You need sediment transport and you need vegetation. And while there's a lot of sediment, the amount of the magnitude of sediment transport was less than expected, and therefore the dunes grew less fast than we expected. There are 2 water bodies. It's the lagoon and the dune lake. The dune lake doesn't have a connection with the sea. The water in the dune lake is also fresh, and we see that sediment that is carried by wind is depositing in the dune lake. It falls into the water and it stays there. There's no mechanism that mobilizes it again. So slowly this dune lake is filling itself with sediment and it becomes smaller, and we see the result of that. We're here standing near the lagoon. This lagoon fills with high tide and low tide when it's connected to the sea, and therefore there's exchange of water between the sea and the lagoon. And this water carries sediment and brings also sediment in the lagoon. So in the lagoon it's a bit more complex. We have the wind blowing sediment, like in the dune lake, but we have also the waves and the tides bringing sediment in the lagoon, and therefore also the lagoon gets smaller. It's chosen to deposit sediment in a way that natural forces distribute the sediment in the coastal profile, and natural forces cause dunes to grow.
The sand motor offers plenty of space for nature and recreation. The increase in the number of benthic animals, and consequently shorebirds, shows that a project such as the sand motor can quickly provide a greater diversity of species in the nature area.
Most of the coastline in the Netherlands is the coast is quite a straight line, and the velocity of the sea movements is everywhere the same. So you get an average type of life in the shallow shoreline. But here in the sand motor, there is a lot of variation in the environment. There are locations where the currents are more strong and locations where the currents are really almost absent. And due to this variation in environments, you have a lot of variation in species living there.
Hikers and kite surfers have also found their way to the sand motor. So it is truly a win-win-win project.
I walk around the sand motor because it's a very nice landscape and it develops every week. Sometimes I have to cross the water, sometimes there is a little water and sometimes I climb the little dunes, so it's very exciting and an adventure every week. It's nice to see that the sand motor is used by people on horses, the cyclists on the path around here, and the people who stay at the holiday homes. You see them enjoying and loving the environment. Yeah, it's very nice to see.
In addition to the direct benefits, the sand motor also yielded a wealth of information. We are already using this knowledge in new coastal maintenance schemes. The sand motor has proven to be a successful pilot project. The construction of this special stretch of beach provides space for nature, contributes to long-term coastal safety, and also offers a valued recreational area for hikers and kite surfers. Moreover, we have gained a wealth of experience that has been applied to other places in coastal management.
So yeah, the video gave a nice introduction. In times of climate change and rising sea levels, technological innovations in sustainable coastal management, like the sand motor we just saw, are very urgently needed. In the Netherlands, we are doing research on a variety of fronts, on a variety of levels as well. But how do we move from research to application to ensure that new technology will contribute structurally to sustainable coastal management in the future? Innovation and implementation come together in this session with Siert de Vries, Associate Professor Coastal Engineering Sciences from TU Delft, with his postdoc Stuart Pearson, and Carola van Gelder, water expert and program manager Zandmotor at Rijkswaterstaat. So please welcome Siert, Stuart and Carola.
Thank you, Sofia. I believe a sustainable coastal landscape can be created. A sustainable coastal landscape can be stimulated, can be managed. Therefore, I believe in creatability, maakbaarheid in Dutch. And an essential ingredient for this creatability is the development of technology. The technology to learn new things, the technology to experiment, the technology to innovate. And I find myself in an environment where the increasing environmental pressures are balanced with a multitude of functions along the coast in the Netherlands. Sea level rise being one of the most important increasing climate stressors, and at the same time, coastal safety, ecology, recreation, and freshwater resources, on the other hand, as a multitude of functions that are used at the coast. And engineering technology is needed to balance the resources with these environmental stressors. And underlying to much of the technology we are developing are physical processes. So quite often I ask myself the question, how do landscapes develop in response to increasing environmental pressures? Winds, waves, tides, currents, etc. And can these natural processes be used to build with nature? Now we've just seen the example of the Zandmotor, and I actually want to show another one. I want to show the example of the Hondsbossen and Pettemer Zeewering. It's about twice the size of the Zandmotor. It's an old sea dike that is converted to a dynamic coastal landscape. Another bold project, and I show that in addition to the Zandmotor because it's the next step. There's a trend that these things are happening more and more. And despite all the uncertainties, because these long-term projects require decisions by people that need to deal with uncertainties. And that's where important technologies come into place. And I'm talking about monitoring and modeling to be able to reduce uncertainties and predict development of these dynamic areas. Monitoring technologies. I find myself on jet skis, measuring the coast from satellites, LiDAR. Yes, we scan, we say to ourselves and to stakeholders, gathering data while monitoring these dynamic coastal landscapes. And on the same slide, I want to emphasize the link to modeling. Predicting the development of these dynamic coastal landscapes is essential to minimize uncertainties, but also to take risk. And I guess when we develop these technologies hand in hand, or I'm actually sure of it, when we develop these technologies hand in hand, we will have a bright future for the Zandmotor, the Dutch coast, and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Sjoerd de Vries. Before we slide over to Stuart's presentation, I have a question for you. What would success be for you?
Well, in the projects I typically work is there's the scientific interest. Yeah, I really love to count sand grains. Yeah, I love the physics of moving sand grains. And on the other hand, there's a societal value. And not always those are easy to balance. You know, you can have this high impact paper and then this limited scientific value or limited societal value. And in for instance, the example of the Zandmotor, it comes together. You can do your science and at the same time you create value for society.
Yeah.
So
what would be success? In short?
If that works.
If it works.
Yeah.
If it comes together.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Stuart, it's time for your presentation. Stuart Pearson, everyone.
Well, and thank you, Sosha. So something I was asked to consider when preparing for today was the question of, well, what engages you and how did I get involved in this? What keeps me going? And honestly, it started a long time ago, and a lot of what I'm doing now is still curiosity-driven research. So when I was a kid growing up in Canada, I loved playing in the sand. I loved reading books, making maps, riding around in boats, and now I get to do that on a professional basis, and it's the best job I've ever had. As a coastal engineer, I get to work with people from all kinds of different disciplines, and it's just an extremely motivating environment and profession to be in. The big question that I'm dealing with is, in line with the stuff that Sjoerd was mentioning, is trying to figure out where does all the sand go. And this goes for both our natural systems, so trying to understand how the sand moves around through natural systems like the Wadden Sea that we see here, but also to figure out if we place a nourishment like the sand engine, where is that going to go? If our coastal safety program here in the Netherlands is going to be based on these kinds of nourishments, we need to have a better understanding of how sand moves through these systems both in the short term but also in the longer term. And one of my favorite parts about this job is just all of the cool stuff that we get to do. And that comes with both trying to develop knowledge and really understand these beautiful natural systems like the Wadden Sea, but also trying to develop and apply new kinds of technology so that we can better understand these systems. And that includes things like these glow-in-the-dark magnetic grains of sand, or also these other measurements that we can do to understand more about the waves and the tides and how sand and mud move around on our coasts. The last kind of thing that we look at is trying to develop predictive models so that we can basically figure out how is this sand going to move through these systems in the coast in the future, and how can we better predict their evolution. The second thing that really drives me in my work is working with good people, and that covers a couple of different fronts. For one, that includes my fellow researchers at the University of Delft, and also the students that we get to work with as pictured here. It includes industry partners, consultancies, or people at other knowledge institutions like my colleagues at Deltares, but lastly also government partners like Rijkswaterstaat, who can actually help us make the link from taking our research, putting it into practice, and then finally making it a part of policy. Now, where do we go from here, and how do we look forward to the future? Well, I think underpinning all of this, and for my motivation at least, is this profound sense of urgency at solving these problems that we have in dealing with climate change and sea level rise. Because I think that the problems we face here in the Netherlands and also around the world are things that really urgently need solutions. So it's very motivating to think that I can even work towards just chipping away at a small part of these big problems. And I think a key to finding those solutions is developing these kinds of partnerships that we have between the different sectors here. That's that.
Thank you, Stuart. And before we move over to Carola's presentation, could you tell me what is your ambition in this research?
Yeah, well, I think on a professional level, I think that my ambition is indeed to see if we can better understand how this sand is moving around and put this in towards policies that we can indeed make a difference and protect people and society from the threats that are facing us. But on a personal level, also, I would like to stay in academia here in the Netherlands and keep doing this research. So I think in connection with the conversations we had this morning, I think that's why things like the sector plan are really important, to continue to give opportunities like this to continue these partnerships and this kind of research.
Definitely, well said. Thank you, Stuart. Carola van Gelder.
Thank you. As a Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, we are responsible for coastal safety. And as you see in the nice movie of the Sand Motor is still one of the iconic coastal projects of the last 10 years. And the reason why we constructed a nature-based solution, as we call it, was how to know what does it do, does it work, and can we use this nature-based solution in the near or also in the far future as a sustainable coastal management tool for coastal safety. But therefore, we need knowledge. We need to know how it works, and does it work, and does it help us to be responsible for the Dutch coast. And therefore, you need knowledge and you need to bring science, policy and practice together. And we work according to what we call the Golden Triangle with science organizations, but also with other governments. And that is what we embrace to work on. But what is exactly our policy? If we look, it has 3 objectives actually, and it has also 3 time spans. The first one is that we have to hold the line. And that means that before 1990, the coastline was eroding. And at that time, the government, the ministry said it had to be stopped. So we should not let the Netherlands get smaller. So we have to hold the line. And since that time, we nourish our coastline every year. On the other hand, we also have dunes. And the dunes have to have a sufficient strength to withstand a design storm. So we have to reinforce them once in a while. And on a bigger scale, we also have to maintain a sufficient sediment volume in what we call the coastal foundation. And that sand is needed to keep up with sea level rise. So these 3 objectives is our policy, our coastal policy. And how do we do that? How do we implement this policy? And we do that according to these steps. We, of course, monitor every year. And we also make calculations and assessments. Then, if we have that, we make a program every year where to nourish. And for that nourishment, we also need a legal authorization, not only from the ministry, but also from regional authorities and permits. And after that, when that's done, we actually can nourish our sand on the beach, on the shore face, or in the channels. But to do so, we need knowledge, and we cannot do that alone. We need lots of people to work, to cooperate with us, to work with us. And there we come into also the universities like Siert and Stuart. They provide us with new technology, new models, and that's why we have knowledge that we can use, especially to help us to make decisions in coastal maintenance, coastal management and policy. So therefore, that's why we embrace this Golden Triangle, and that's what I think that sustainable coastal management needs, sustainable coastal communities. Thank you.
Carola van Gelder. Well, thank you all for your presentations. Before we move over to the panel discussion, Carola, I have a question for you, because what do you seek in supporting NWO projects?
Well, I think the sand motor is quite a big example in the value of researchers and all the knowledge they gained and they provided. But we have other projects as well in the whole Netherlands. And one of the projects that was Stuart was working on, that was the Ebb-tidal delta in Ameland. And because of his question, he said, where does the sand go? It gives us a broader perspective of, okay, there are new young people with other ideas and and also see it with modeling and new techniques that gives us a new vision of how to deal with coastal management. On the other hand, if we are actually working with all the results they come up with, so they, and I mean the students, PhD students, can see that it's not put on the shelf, the reports, but it's also it's really implemented in policy. And I think that's the value of working together, and that's why we seek for NWO projects.
Nice, very nice. All right, so we're open for discussion. Audience, if you would like to say something, ask something, please stand up and a microphone will find you. I have a first question, so the audience can think of a question. About the future of the Delta, the Dutch Delta. What innovations await us, and what is needed for a smooth implementation of those? Who wants to react on that? Siert. What do you think?
I think what awaits us is an increase of pressure. And
increase of what?
Of pressure. And in terms of innovations, I think what awaits us is more integral approach to develop the coastal landscape. Not only for safety, but also for ecology, but also for freshwater resources. Yeah. And we're just scratching the surface of combining these different functions of the coastal landscape in our innovations. And I think that's, how is that smoothly implemented?
Smoothly?
I think awareness, that is the awareness of the possibility, and also freedom for local implementations. I mean, not every coast at every location will look the same.
No,
maybe people in Amsterdam want something else than in Rotterdam or Den Haag. Yeah. So the local implementation, I think, is very important as well.
Very important, yeah. Carola, I can see you nodding your head. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. It's not just coastal safety, it's the pressure of all types of functions in the coastal area, but it's also society. I mean, we can decide as technicians, as engineers, how to deal with sea level rise and how to deal in the delta, but it's also society has their points. Do we want to give up the coast? Do we want to give up specific things? Do we want to give up nature? That's what Siert said, and that's the goal, or the pressure we feel, and that we have to deal with. But we have to do it together.
Yeah, we have to do it together. And speaking of doing together, is there anyone who has a question in the audience? No? No questions? Good, then I will proceed. So where do we stand in the Netherlands compared to other countries with coastal management?
Well, I think...
Who are you pointing at? There's no one there.
I don't know. I think... speaking as somebody who came from Canada to the Netherlands, because this is such an exciting place to do coastal research, I mean...
Why? Why exciting?
Well, I think you just have such a high concentration of people working in the water sector, both in research but in practice. There's so many different companies, and the government institutions are so supportive that it's almost kind of like a Silicon Valley of water research here in the Netherlands, and so it just makes it a very exciting place to do research. It's what brought me here 7 years ago, and it's what keeps me here and today. So it's a really cool place to be in this field.
Cool, I can imagine. And what can we expect from all that research, and what do government researchers expect? Do you understand my question?
What do government researchers expect? Well, I mentioned it in my presentation as well. We cannot do it alone as a government. We have to combine forces. We have to join data sets. We have to join models, technology, to cope with, or to come up with sea level rise, and that's one of the big challenges we have to do, that we have in front of us. But that's why, well, it's not the first time that we work together. We work together for a long time already, so, and we keep up that spirit, and we are full of ideas, and that's also good that we have new students coming in, new PhD students that have another perspective, another view on specific problems, and maybe new ideas on technologies, and that helps us a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you once more underline the importance of doing it together, working on this big thing together?
The Netherlands is from all of us. It's not just from the government or from the TU Delft, or it's the place where we live. So I think this is the reason why we all together have to choose what to do when the sea levels rise, when climate is changing.
Yeah.
And okay, we all have our responsibilities, but with all those responsibilities together, you can work together and you can make the Netherlands a nice place to be and to stay.
Make the Netherlands great again.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's your
So what can I do? Like this, I'm just a citizen, in a way. So what could I do?
Well, I think already there's even more initiatives for one engage in citizen science. So there's an initiative, the Coast Snap initiative, which was started by some colleagues in Australia and has already spread here to the Netherlands, and where they're looking at basically, if you take a picture of a beach and you can see how it looks that particular day, then, and if everybody is taking a picture from the same spot, you build up this database of how the beach has changed through time. And so that's just one example of ways that citizens can really engage in this kind of process. And it's useful data for us on the scientific side. But then I think as a citizen also, that just becoming more engaged in the problems and educated and informed about the threats facing us from sea level rise and climate change. I think that, and putting that forward to elected representatives is very important.
Definitely, definitely. Does someone have to add something to that?
I think I want to second what Stuart was saying about awareness. I think we are a very vulnerable country, but when it's not a typical discussion on birthdays, how we are dealing with our threat of water. So I think what can we do as a society? I sometimes miss a little bit of awareness for what's facing us. Yeah.
But awareness in what way?
In a way that we understand that that we are facing a challenge, and that we're gonna make mistakes, and that we're gonna live with water in a way that is. Let me give you an example of the US. Yeah, in the US,
It's awareness. I mean,
in the US, there's a lot of awareness because there's floodings every 5 or 6 years, and
Exactly.
people they have to rebuild their house and stuff. And we don't have that in the Netherlands.
No.
We sort of outsource the awareness to government institutes, and I think we as a society could become more aware for their activities, and also for our own responsibility when it comes to that.
And who should get us there then, to get us more aware?
Well, I think that we also have a responsibility for doing outreach and sort of giving people the opportunity to get more informed and finding ways to engage more people in these kinds of conversations about our field. Everybody likes a day at the beach, but how can we connect that with the kinds of issues that we're dealing with in our research? And I think being able to bridge those gaps is, I think, an important thing to do. Also to cut through the misinformation that's being spread around these days, to give people sort of a better bullshit detector, for lack of a better term, on how to understand climate change and sea level rise impacts to our systems and what we can do about it.
Definitely, yeah. Fake news has something to do with that as well, of course. Yeah. Well, I think this seems like a wonderful closing for our panel discussion. Thank you for contributing. And Siert, I believe you would like to close with this session with a video about living dikes from Bas Borsje.
Yeah.
Why? Why this video?
It's actually a video from competing universities, colleagues of us, and I think it was nice to just show some how do you say, connectivity in our academic environment, to show an additional example from another universities to close this session.
Okay, well, let's take a look then. Thank you so much. Siert, Stuart, and Carola. Thank you.
De uitdaging die we hier hebben is dat de zeespiegel langzaam aan het stijgen is. En tegelijk komen er steeds meer stormen, steeds vaker heftige stormen op ons af. En wat we dus moeten doen, is onze kust verdedigen. En we zijn hier in Noord-Nederland, waar 50 kilometer dijk op dit moment is afgekeurd. Nou, normaal zouden we deze dijk gaan verhogen, met alle gevolgen voor het dorpje hierachter. Maar wat wij denken is, als we die kwelder, dus dat begroeide land hiervoor en de watplaten, is gaan benutten, dat dat gezamenlijk in staat is om golven te remmen. En zodoende dat die dijk dus veel minder belasting krijgt, dus veel minder krachten op die dijk. En dan hoef je zo'n dijk misschien niet te verhogen, maar dan kan je dus op dezelfde hoogte laten om dat achterland te beschermen. En het mooie is dat die kwelders ook mee kunnen groeien met de zeespiegel. Dus als de zeespiegel langzaam omhoog gaat, dan zal deze vegetatie die hierop staat er ook voor zorgen dat het sediment, dus het zand en het slib, langzaam meegroeit met de zeespiegel. Dus dat dit voor heel veel jaren een oplossing zou kunnen zijn.
We meten dus onder andere met dit soort instrumenten wat er gebeurt onder verschillende omstandigheden. Dus onder dagelijkse omstandigheden, als het water inkomt, hoe hoog is het water, hoe hoog zijn de golven. Maar dus ook tijdens stormen. Stel dat hier een grote storm komt, dan kunnen we meten wat er met de bodem gebeurt. Op deze plek, maar ook verder op de kwelder of verder zeewaarts. Kijken we naar de bodemveranderingen tijdens een storm, hoe hoog die golven zijn tijdens die bodemveranderingen. En of die kwelder dus daadwerkelijk op de plek blijft liggen onder die extreme omstandigheden. Maar we kijken ook op andere plekken. Dus niet alleen naar deze kwelder die op een meer natuurlijke wijze wellicht is ontstaan, maar ook naar semi-natuurlijke kwelders. En zelfs buiten Nederland doen we onderzoek naar hoe vooroevers, bijvoorbeeld in de tropische zone, kunnen bijdragen aan golfdemping en hoe stabiel ze zijn onder extreme omstandigheden.
Naast het onderzoek aan die kant van de dijk is het ook erg belangrijk om de mensen aan deze kant van de dijk mee te nemen. Om ook zo draagvlak te creëren. Omdat deze bewoners natuurlijk ook te maken hebben met die oplossing. Aan de andere kant, Rijkswaterstaat en het waterschap is verantwoordelijk voor die dijk, dus ook daar moeten we mee samenwerken. Natuurorganisaties die aan de andere kant ook weer letten op hoe de natuurontwikkeling gaat. En tal van andere overheden die natuurlijk over dit hele gebied wat te zeggen hebben. En samen met dat hele consortium zoeken we naar hoe een levende dijk ingepast kan worden hier in deze gemeenschap en zodoende een duurzame oplossing kan zijn. Nou, we gaan niet alleen in het veld testen, maar we gaan ook naar het laboratorium toe. In Delft, bij Deltares, gaan we een hele grote levende dijk nabouwen in de deltagoot. Dat is een hele lange goot waar golven gegenereerd kunnen worden. De grootste kunstmatige golven van de wereld. En dan gaan we een levende dijk belasten. Kijken hoe sterk die is. We gaan met een stormchase team op zoek naar de storm om te kijken hoe een kwelder daarop reageert. We gaan modellen en tools ontwikkelen om ook op andere plekken dan hier in de Waddenzeekust het ontwerp te kunnen inzetten. En tot slot gaan we natuurlijk implementeren. We gaan onze oplossing bouwen. Dus over 5 jaar zou het geweldig zijn als we hier in Nederland de eerste levende dijk kunnen aanleggen. En ook wereldwijd mogelijkheden hebben verkend om ook daar levende dijken te gaan bouwen. En de economische meerwaarde van deze kennis, om die ook in het buitenland in te zetten, is om hele kwetsbare gebieden, dus steden waar al een heel groot probleem is met klimaatverandering en de rijzende zeespiegel, om ook daar een oplossing te geven die duurzaam is. En dus niet alleen voor de korte termijn, maar ook voor de lange termijn, dat ook daar die plekken duurzaam zich kunnen ontwikkelen.